It was early Sunday morning. I and Kate, my girlfriend, had just woken up from the long night before that had been our 3-year anniversary. I woke up with my arms still wrapped around her. She was still half asleep. I couldn't blame her. Like I said, it had been a long night. We had just gotten off work and both made our way home. I had gotten there before she did, and when she pulled up, I got out of the car. I ran up and picked her up and swung her around as if we'd both die tomorrow. I remember carrying her like I did when we first bought our house, over the threshold and over the couch, where I let her down, then leaned in and kissed her. We were both so happy. We both went upstairs and got ready for the night. I had bought 2 bottles of wine for us to kick the night off. Our plan was just to hang out in the bedroom, drink wine, and celebrate our day of the love we felt for each other. We got ready and went upstairs, hand in hand. I gazed into her deep blue eyes as we ascended. The blue was a beautiful contrast to her red hair, and her smile was enough to steal a man's breath and leave him a passion-soaked husk. It was her smile that spelled 1,000 voiceless words, as it told stories of love and excitement and of her feeling of safety and comfortable life one could never tell in a spoken tale. We reached the bedroom and I picked her up. We both fell into the bed. I landed on top of her, practically burying myself in her chest. I laid there for a short while as I listened to the chorus of her heartbeat. It was a silent song that almost lulled me to sleep. I felt her slap me slightly on the head as she chuckled over my playfulness. I rose up with a smile and kissed her, her blue eyes slowly closing as our lips met. The sweet taste of her lips enraged me with passion that was of a free beast caught in the throes of wild love. We looked into each other's eyes and sat still. She chuckled and pulled me in. She turned me on my back and laid next to me on my chest. The warmth and touch of her body was enough to cause my heart to race. We almost fell asleep, but I caught myself and told her I would go downstairs to get the wine. She groaned a little. I couldn't say that I blamed her. I would have laid in bed with her for my entire life. The entire time, me and her crushing each other in our arms as if we'd die tomorrow. I got up and went downstairs to retrieve the wine. I smiled as I heard her unzip her pants to get into something more comfortable. I walked into the kitchen where I had set down the bottles. There they were, both side by side, waiting to be opened. I grabbed them and headed back toward the stairs. I turned a corner to be startled by a woman in nurse's clothes. I dropped a bottle in fear. "Who are you? Why are you in my house?" "You need to come back now. It's been too long now." I was more confused than scared. Who was she? And what was she doing in here? "Who are you?" I asked again. "It's time to wake up. Come back now." Just as she said that, the whole house seemed to change. It went from the quiet house I felt so safe in, into a white concrete room that visually reeked of death and despair. I looked down towards my hands and saw that I wasn't holding the bottles anymore. I wasn't even in my own clothes. I was wearing white shorts and pants. A big metal-looking door appeared where an open doorway once was. The nurse left the room and closed the door behind her, the locking mechanism clicking and banging as it sealed me within. Outside the room, the nurse met with a doctor that was observing me through a 2-way window. She stood beside him with a saddened look on her face. The doctor sighed at the sight in front of him. "It's too hard to watch. I couldn't imagine being of his state of mind." "Does he see it yet? It's been so long." "No, sadly, he'll never realize she's not real. All he ever thinks about is her. It's sad. I simply cannot believe he does not remember the accident." I found the old tattered book in an ornate wooden box. It was part of my family heirloom, which I considered a bunch of junk that was taking up attic space, collecting dust and rotting away in its dark confines. Having set aside some money over the years, I was planning on remodeling the upper floors of my house, including the attic, which would provide a nice space to set up my home cinema. Naturally, it would have to be cleared out, cleaned, and the exterminators would take care of any pests that had smuggled themselves into the house. The process of cleaning alone proved to be a tedious chore. I'd find some long forgotten junk, put it in a large garbage bag, but being me, I'd go through them and decide that perhaps some of the items were worth salvaging, so I'd end up with half-empty bags and most of the junk back in the attic. This reached a point where I just told myself to clench my teeth, close my eyes, and just chuck it all. During one such raid on these remnants from the past, I found the wooden box. It looked as if it had seen better days. Most of the carvings had been deteriorated to the point where they no longer looked like anything other than scratches. This didn't apply to the lid though. On it, one could clearly see a woman dressed, as far as I could guess, aristocratically next to a peculiar tree. Its branches looked as if they were carved to imitate movement, not the swaying in the wind kind, but more akin to slithering or squirming. More importantly, it had no leaves or fruit on it, a barren, alien thing imitating a tree. The cover was not transfixed by any lock or other mechanism that I could identify, but would nevertheless not bulge when I tried to open it. I turned the box upside down and sideways, looking at it from all possible angles, but it just would not share its secret with me. I started running my hand along its sides, in hopes of finding a hidden button or something of that sort. That didn't do the trick either. Well, if we reach a diplomatic impasse, we can always try brute force. So I picked up a screwdriver and jammed it into the side of the lid. A choice I came to regret immediately. The moment the flathead of the screwdriver connected with the box, my hand felt numb, as if a strong electrical current had it hit, resulting in me dropping the tool like a burning coal. Now, I'm not a man prone to outbursts or general anger management issues, but I'd be damned if a cursed wooden box would not yield to me. By now, I was also convinced that this was some modern trick toy, rather than a genuine vintage wooden box. So I stepped on it. I hit it with a hammer. I tossed it against all four walls of the attic, reaching a point where I plainly screamed at it to open. Nothing would give. Sweating profusely and being out of breath, I was half inclined to just throw it away, when I thought to ask it nicely. I mean, nothing normal worked. Maybe something more on the supernatural side of things would have better results. While clenching my eyes, I put my right hand flat on the box's lid and said, "Open sesame." Nothing. I opened one eye looking at my hand. "Open, please." My hand was assaulted with a stinging pain I had never witnessed before. It was as if someone had shoved a burning poker through it while rotating it frantically. What was adding to my horror was that this didn't feel like the pain you have from an accident, such as cutting yourself by mistake or grabbing a hot pot absent-mindedly. This pain was being caused with intent, with something akin to hunger. Suffice to say that I lifted my hand as fast as I could, but even so, the box must have claimed its bounty. The carved wooden tree was now pregnant with red leaves, and the woman was crying crimson tears. With a soft sigh, the box came open. When I was in high school, my friends and I had a peculiar pastime. Like any teenage delinquent, we liked to cause trouble. We weren't vandals, we didn't deal drugs, and we certainly didn't bully kids in school. No, we liked to scare the living shit out of new parents by hacking their baby monitors. We were insufferable little punks who thought we were too good to get caught, and that our little acts of mischief would go unpunished. One night, however, I learned my lesson, and I realized that I wasn't quite as bulletproof as my tremendous adolescent ego made me out to be. Dimitri, Kurt, and I went to the same school, shared many of the same classes, and hung out almost every evening after chow time. We watched prank shows and played video games and talked about who had the nicest rack in school. One evening, we were trading scary stories at the park. Kurt shared the classic story about the single mother who heard a haunting voice on her baby monitor. Like most horror stories, it sounded like total bullshit, but Dimitri told us it happened to his mom once. On her own monitor, she'd heard a neighbor singing at her baby. Apparently, it was possible to accidentally tap into someone else's frequency. In an instant, a light bulb turned on in each of our heads. When you're close enough to someone, you don't need words to know what that person is thinking, and we could all tell that we were thinking the same exact thing. We were going to buy a baby monitor, and we were going to screw with people. Pardon the pun, but hacking a baby monitor is child's play. All you need to do is find a device on the same frequency as yours. Never one to do things half-assed, I purchased a high-end monitor with a frequency dial so we could prank as many targets as possible. The following night, we took to our bikes, roamed the neighborhood, and found our first victim. We could see the nursery from the suburban home's second-floor window. Dimitri grabbed the baby monitor and began tuning it to different frequencies until we heard breathing. I remember feeling excited as our plan finally came to fruition. Dimitri pressed the button and began exhaling heavily into the receiver.
"Your little girl was delicious,"
he murmured using his demonic voice. The light in the master bedroom turned on almost immediately, and we heard a shrill scream. Laughing our asses off, we quickly rode off down the street so we wouldn't get caught. We repeated the prank several times over the course of the following weeks, each taking turns talking through the monitor, not wanting anyone to get wise to our little game. We chose different houses every time. People's reactions were priceless. Some mothers would reply in a panic. Others seemed to know it was a hoax and told us to shut up. And one poor woman even started sobbing uncontrollably, begging us not to hurt her baby. I feel bad about that last one now that I'm older, but it was hilarious to me back then. My friends and I mimicked her high-pitched brawling and desperate cries for mercy for weeks afterwards. Yeah, we were royal dicks. Karma's a bitch, and I got what was coming to me one night. Kurt and Dimitri were busy studying for their midterms, so I went out on my own. By then, we'd gotten pretty much everyone in the surrounding area, so I decided to venture off across town into an unfamiliar territory. Finding a target wasn't difficult. You just had to look for cars with baby seats, houses with overly colorful cartoon-themed curtains, or toys left in the yard. I came across a house that fit all three criteria and parked my bike outside of view. Playing with the tuner, I eventually found the right frequency. I could hear the sound of a baby snoring very slightly. A devious little smirk pushed its way into my lips, and my heart began pounding with excitement. It was my time to shine.
"I am watching,"
I whispered into the monitor, using the creepiest voice I could muster. The house remained dark and lifeless. I figured the homeowners hadn't heard me.
"I stand over your bed, watching, waiting. I will get you,"
I said louder this time. Nothing. just the sounds of crickets chirping and the occasional dull roar of a car driving down the street. It was a little odd. Parents usually reacted much quicker than that. I began feeling a little nervous, somewhat exposed. You know, like when you suddenly realize some creeper's gawking at you. It was getting late, and I had a long bike ride home. And just as I was about to give up and leave, I heard a strange, moist gargling coming from the monitor. The quiet, rhythmic snore ceased, and I assumed the baby had woken up and was about to start crying. Instead, a man spoke to me.
You're the one being watched now, Juan.
He said softly. My stomach turned at his words. How did he know my name? I felt sick. Something was very wrong, and I could feel it in my bones. I glanced up at the nursery window and saw a silhouette standing there watching me. Had he been there the whole time? The air was thick and difficult to inhale, though perhaps fear was making it hard to breathe. My body quivered uncontrollably as a sense of dread poured into every inch of me. I climbed on my bike, pedaling desperately to get away, but the overwhelming need to flee overpowered my rational mind.
You can't run. I know where you live, Juan.
Continued the man, even as I turned the corner. I flew down the street, not stopping until I reached a busy boulevard, surrounded by cars and a few late-night joggers. I felt safe.
Your hoodie will run red with your blood, boy.
Whispered the man, still talking through the baby monitor in my pocket. A passerby gave me a nasty look as I yelped loudly in fear, practically ripping my hoodie in my frantic attempt at removing it. To the stranger, I must have looked like some snotty kid tripping balls or something. He didn't know I was in genuine distress, so I didn't blame him for walking off with an insulted huff, though I wish he had offered to help me. After stuffing the hoodie into my backpack, I noticed my name scrawled on the back. It was my fucking school jacket. No wonder that bastard knew my name. It then occurred to me that baby monitors were fairly short-ranged, so I was obviously being followed. I nervously glanced around to try and identify my stalker. Was it the empty-looking van down the street? That guy walking his dog? The car that had just driven by? Either way, the last thing I wanted to hear was that voice again, so I turned off the device and started pedaling towards my home. Fear had heightened my senses, and I began to notice every motion of the trees, every crackle of twigs under my wheels, and every car that zipped past me. I flinched whenever anyone came near, paranoid that whoever had spoken to me through that baby monitor was going to catch up. Fortunately, I made it home without incident. I parked the bike in my garage and crawled up the stairs to my bedroom. In one careless motion, I tossed my backpack and the baby monitor in the corner of my room, and dove under my sheets like an Olympic swimmer. Doesn't matter how old you are, nothing feels safer than being under your blanket. I closed my eyes, hoping I'd be able to calm down enough to catch a few hours of rest before class. But then I heard static coming from the monitor across the room. The monitor was supposed to be turned off.
Sweet dreams, Juan.
Said the voice that still haunts my nightmares. I didn't sleep a wink that night. I was too frightened to get out of bed until sunrise. When I got up, my first order of business was to remove the battery from the monitor and throw it in the trash. I didn't want anything to do with it anymore. I came up with an excuse to give my buddies so they wouldn't think I was a huge pussy. With massive bags under my eyes, I got dressed, had breakfast, and went to school. It wasn't until a few days later that I saw the house on the news. In an interview, a police officer explained that the small family who had been living in the house had been found in their beds, necks slit open. I had been outside when it happened. The killer heard me on the baby monitor and decided to fuck with me. It was definitely a wake-up call, and I thank my lucky stars that I hadn't gotten murdered that night. I was too busy feeling thankful that I survived to feel bad about the family that hadn't. Empathy, like wisdom, comes with age. Now that I'm an adult with a wife and daughter, I truly understand the consequences of my actions and the severity of the situation I put myself in as a tremendously stupid teenage boy. That dreadful night, I thought I reached the epitome of fear, but it was just the tip of the iceberg. As a father, I now know that fear thrives and multiplies when there's something more precious than your own life at stake. I can't say for sure whether the killer found me again after all these years, or whether a new breed of idiots had the same idea as my friends and I, but I can tell you that I now understand what true terror is. Last night, I heard something on our baby monitor that sent chills into my very soul, shackling me with a paralyzing fear that I doubt will ever leave me.
I'm still watching